Welcome on in, everybody. My Greatsword throwing hatchet build. I promised I'd share it with you guys soon, so here it is. I've been having a lot of fun playing this guy recently, and I have been playing it mostly on my Iron Man character, but I jumped onto my Legacy guy just to get some PvP footage for you guys and share this build video. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. This build has really good stamina sustain, really good healing power, really good mobility. It hits super hard. I think the worst part about the build is that throwing hatchet is pretty hard to aim, but when you do connect, it can do quite a lot of damage. But in general, I think that this build just has great all-around utility in PvP, and it can excel at all kinds of different PvP game modes, Outpost Rush, Open World. I'm sure you could bring this into a war. It's quite good at slapping down healers as well. And the full build breakdown is going to be in the second half of the video, so if you guys want to check out the build right away, you can skip ahead to there. Otherwise, we're going to start off with some PvP commentary. The first fight here in Outpost Rush, all of these fights actually in Outpost Rush, that's where I went to go and try to get some clips. I managed to pick up a kill on these players already, but there's quite a few players chasing me, and I do a good job getting on top of this guy, hit him with a lot of damage on the Calamity counter, and I think the bleed tick is what actually finishes him off there. The hatchet, I think, hit a player in front, not the player that I was trying to land that killing blow, and then I go right away back to just kind of trying to line of sight these guys as best as possible using the rocks. They're piling on top of me though. Lots of direction changes as you roll. Very important, especially now, I think, with that additional snare that you get when you get hit by a melee attack. That affecting the rolls this patch means that you have to be really, really careful with your positioning in light armor. And I get a good heavy attack on that guy. Managed to absorb quite a few hits and get the knockback on the counter. And then I just keep on moving around, and yeah, nasty spot to get stuck in there. I take a lot of damage from him, and I think I should have gone for the double roll there. I get hit by an arrow, but I might have been able to stall for the potion. Moving on to the next fight, in the enemy outpost this time, and there are two players in here, a healer and a very high damage musket spear player. The musket player just starts taking shots at me, and I just want to pull him into a position where I can get on top of him right away, versus trying to chase him and have him run away and just get to a higher vantage point. I managed to get a good entrance there. He does dodge my initial attack. I managed to dodge the bomb that he put on me, and a nice counter with the Calamity counter. Big damage on the spin, and then one heavy attack, and the very squishy player ends up going down. This guy traps me with the vines, but I don't think he was expecting me to turn around and start swinging. He maybe should have committed to a secondary stun there. Instead, he backed up and panicked a little, so I just very quickly took him down with the heavies. And the enemy healer, I just taken big chunks out of him with the Greatsword. One thing about this build that I quite enjoy is that it is actually quite good at killing healers. They cannot stand close to you, especially light armor healers, because they are going to take these kinds of nasty damage combos. And yeah, that was a pretty brutal backstab with the steadfast strike. And this next clip here, just a single kill, but I was talking up about how the hatchet can actually hit pretty hard. And yeah, I may as well include a clip of the hatchet doing a little bit of damage. Here you can see I'm duking it out with this mage here, and I managed to get some decent damage in with the Greatsword, and then look at this hatchet combo. Oh my god, that was over 7k damage within 3 hits with the hatchet, 3.3k on that last hit. Absolutely beautiful. On to the next fight. As you guys can see, I'm just defending my end of the outpost rush this time, and there's a lot of guys at the door here. One of them ends up chasing me to the outside here. I get a lot of damage into him with the heavies. He gets caught in that very deadly snare, and I just managed to stay on top of him with the spin. He turns around and hits me with the stagger to keep that distance, so good move by him to stay alive. And in come the enemy healers, another player from behind. I have a friendly player here with me, but he gets killed very quickly, and now it's back to just me. And these guys are throwing down multiple ice storms there. I do get hit by the heavy attack, so I end up getting stuck. Here my hit points start to drop really low. Make sure that I stay on the hatchet bar at this time. So if they do hit me with a lethal attack as I'm running away there, the life save passive will kick in and I won't die to it. Either way, I managed to not only survive, but turn around and hit this guy for a super nasty rush into the heavy attack. And it just outright kills him. And now it's me and the mage that I initially started fighting. And he's doing a good job just kind of zoning me out with the Ice Gauntlet and chipping away with the Fire Staff. I'm just kind of throwing hatchets at him, and yeah. Oh man, in video games, always talk trash after your opponent is dead. I think that's the lesson to be learned here. Either way, he turns around and decides he's actually going to fight me. I am, I think, faster than him with this kind of a setup. I managed to catch him with a lot of damage. The Steadfast Strike doing quite a bit there. And he right away goes into his Ice Tomb and pops out, drinks his potion, and he turns around. And I think he's going to start blasting me. Yeah, that was the wrong move. I think I think I got under his skin a little bit. I don't know what to say. If you're not having fun, you can always log out. Either way, I'm not going to let him escape that easily. And down he goes. Moving on to the next fight. This one is just a 2v1, but it's against a kind of stun-focused opponent and a healer. Healer's always making the fight difficult for you when you're outnumbered. But again, this build has that kind of burst power that the healers have to watch out. And I actually managed to get a lot of damage into that guy with the Relentless Rush. And he right away retreats, heals up, and his healer friend turns with the Void Gauntlet on me to try to hold me still. I just quickly pop out of there with the Hatchet and just start throwing hatchets at a distance. This guy actually holding block with his shield and just absorbing those incoming hatchets. And I'm just kind of being patient here. He does end up jumping out towards me. I try to go for the Steadfast Strike. He just ends up blocking it. Not really the best move. Get the Calamity counter at least to get the stagger on the enemy healer. And then I swing with the Greatsword. I get big damage on the healer. And then right away just turn around and swing another hit into the other player there. I caught him, I think, a little off guard because he thought I was going to go after the healer. I did notice his health drop from that big AoE swing. And now I catch the healer with his stam down. This is where healers die to Greatsword as soon as their stam drops. And moving on to the final clip I have for you guys. Again, healer trying to run away. What happens? They can't deal with that damage. Oh my god. Light armor healers getting absolutely wrecked by Greatswords. Just heavy pressure, I think. And yeah. Another player comes in here. I start throwing hatchets at him. He throws down the Ice Storm there. I do get caught by his Ice Shower, but I managed to track to him using the Greatsword Heavy, and then I hit the Calamity counter, and I get a nice big crit. Surprised I killed that player. Lots of damage coming off that crit, and I put really good damage into this guy. He ends up retreating, healing up, and he goes into the Detonate. Nothing a counter can't absorb and send him flying back from. And a couple friendly players come in to finish slugging him down. Alright, let's take a look at the build. Starting off with the attribute points, 150 con, 200 dex, and 159 strength. I think that the 150 dexterity passive is pretty useful for this build, especially with how mobile and kitey it is, so putting at least 150 in dex I would highly recommend, but you can go for 200 in either strength or dexterity. It's kind of up to the user what you want to get here. Alternatively, you could also go for the 300 strength setup on this and just have grit on your light and the full duration of your heavy attacks, but it's up to the user. Honestly, the damage on this build is really good, so you can even go 150 and just start putting more points in Constitution if you want it as well. Taking a look at the equipment I have, a perfect Greatsword for this build. Abyssal Attunement, Energizing Counter, and Trenchant Strikes. Really, really high damage with Trenchant Strikes and Abyssal Attunement on those heavy attacks. And then, of course, Energizing Counter, a huge deal for just conserving stamina and making sure that you have stamina when you do use your counter. The Hatchet is a throwing hatchet, so I've got Keen Speed, Empowering Rending Throw, and Vicious on here. Ideally, instead of Vicious, I would go for another attunement perk here as well, but the Empowering Rending Throw is the absolute must-have for the Hatchet. It makes a huge impact on how much damage your throwing axes do, and the Keen Speed just stacks with the other sources of mobility that the Hatchet has. And then for the gems on these weapons, with the Hatchet, I just stuck with the regular Opal for that increased damage when stamina is not full, which is often when you're in PvP. But on the Greatsword, I went with the Energized Opal to give that additional stamina return when you hit an opponent with a successful attack. Greatsword burns through stamina quickly, and it also has great stamina sustain. So this build, I went really heavy with packing on the stam sustain, and I quite enjoyed the results. Taking a look at the rest of my gear here, I've got a lot of the PvP reward track gear that is Shirking Heals, Refreshing, and Resilient on. This is not a bad set to have at all for this stuff. I think Shirking Fortification might be a little bit better. Honestly, for a light armor dodgy build, Shirking Heals is a pretty good PvP perk to have. Ideally, Shirking Heals, Shirking Fortification, and Resilient, but that is a pipe dream piece of armor. And then taking a look at the legs I have here, perfect best in slot, Shirking Energy, Shirking Fortification, Resilient, absolutely amazing. And then Relentless Freedom is the important perk that you want to have on your armor, just so that you can actually remove the roots and slows when you use Relentless Rush. Again, for the gems, I've got a mix of different things. I'll get to the resists in a sec, but the energized gems, I think, are the choice to go with here. You could also go for life stealing if you want, because this build has some pretty good life stealing too, but the stam sustain, yeah, you honestly can't have too much stam sustain in PvP. And then for the jewelry, the amulet, stamina recovery, health, and shirking empower. I think this is pretty best in slot. Damage, the max health, big deal. And then the stamina recovery, actually very useful when you find yourself in a really bad situation. The ring, of course, Legate's ring, leeching, slash damage, keen awareness. This is a unique drop that you can get in Brimstone Sands, and this is best in slot for the build because it doubles up on the 2 offensive perks, slash damage and keen awareness. Leeching is also great because this build has a pretty decent amount of lifesteal thanks to the Greatsword tree that I'm running. And then for the earring, of course, Healthy Toast, Refreshing Toast, Regenerating, best in slot healing jewelry for, I think, any PvP build. Now, for the Heart Gem, I've gone with the Grasping Vines. Ideally, I would upgrade this to the one that heals you when you deal damage to people that are trapped by the vines. I like this the most with this build because if you do catch people with the vines, you can dish out a lot of AoE damage with those Greatsword Heavies and the Relentless Rush, so really good just combination offense and defense ultimate, I think, for this build. I think that Stoneform would also be very trolly on this build, and you could even run Detonate if you wanted to deliver a little bit more AoE burst pressure. But in general, it's kind of up to the user. In the footage, I'm sure you guys saw, I didn't use vines once. Yeah, I've been playing a lot on a lower level character. I'm not used to using the Heart Rune. My bad. And then when we take a look at the resists of this build, I have focused on thrust resistance and fire resist. Now, Fire Staff is a lot less common than it used to be, so I actually think I would be a little better off focusing on slash damage reduction and keeping that focus on thrust reduction. But in general, just running 10% all resists is perfectly fine too. It's kind of up to the user what you want to do. I do a lot of outpost rush, so I feel like thrust resist at least is a must-have. Of course, you want to use potions, regen potions, and mana potions because of that healthy toast that the earring has. And then for the final slot, I've got the Gemstone Dust. You could go for the Oak Flesh Bomb here if you wanted to. Honestly, I think Oak Flesh Bomb would probably be the better choice right now because of all the thrust and slash damage going around. It's up to the user, depends on what you're fighting. And then let's take a look at the weapon mastery, starting off with Greatsword. I have built this to be mostly a blue tree, but this build actually spends a lot of time in onslaught stance thanks to the aggressive shift. The moves, Relentless Rush, Steadfast Strike, and Calamity Counter. I can apply a lot of bleeds with these 2 skills, and the Greatsword heavy attacks will also apply bleeds, and they will have grit thanks to the unflinching blade. So not only does this build do a lot of damage, but it stacks a lot of damage over time if you start hitting people with your moves. The really important Greatsword passives, I think, though, Arrow Deflection, so we can actually block ranged attacks, and then those big Stam Sustain passives, Faultless Defender to reduce the cost of block significantly, Step and Strike for the additional damage and Stam Sustain, Critical Comeback for that additional Stam Sustain as well. Swift Onslaught I really like. Since Relentless Rush is my only Onslaught skill, every time I use it I will have that haste up, so that's really nice for this build. And then for Relentless Rush, I went with the Adaptive Rush here for the root and the heal, but I didn't go with the Relentless Refresh simply because I wanted to prioritize putting points in this side so I could get that Undying Defiance for the additional healing. I liked this build better with Undying Defiance because I felt like I had a little bit more bulk, especially when I was doing melee exchanges. But if you wanted to, Unrelenting Onslaught is also a perfectly viable passive for your Greatsword tree as well. You just have to put a few more points over here. And then taking a look at the Hatchet, I am running a Throwing Hatchet setup here. So taking advantage of the Berserker tree so I can get that Defy Death. Fully investing, of course, in Berserk, a very good ability for the Hatchet. And the passives I've taken here are mostly just damage increasing passives for the most part. I do get a little bit of cooldown reduction with some of it, but most of these passives aren't going to have the biggest impact on your throwing axe damage. This side of the tree, however, you definitely want to get Hurling Force for that additional damage based on distance. Adrenaline Rush for the Stam Sustain, as well as Rejuvenating Crits for the Stam Sustain is also a big deal. And of course that Aim Throw, so you can actually throw your Hatchet. You don't have to play a Throwing Hatchet with this build. Honestly, you could go for the Feral Rush setup instead, but I quite like the Throwing Axe. It's hard to aim, but it can hit very hard when you connect on somebody. And I didn't invest into the Rending Throw any further. You could actually get more damage out of the Rending Throw if I put more points in here, but for the sake of making sure that I have that Defy Death passive, it's just the sacrifice I had to make. There you go, guys. That is the build. I hope you enjoyed the video. I've got one last fight here as I say goodbye. If you want to see me play live, check me out on Twitch. You can find a written guide to this build on my website, pvpnewworld.com. I do the New World Top 5 fights. If you have a clip you want to see on it, you can send it to Kristofer at pvpnewworld.com. A quick shout out to our sponsor, ExpressVPN. You guys know what it does. If you want to get a deal on your first purchase, there's a link down below for you. And as always, a massive thank you to all of my patrons on Patreon. Thank you, everybody, just for tuning in and watching. Of course, I hope you enjoyed, and I hope to see you guys next time. Have a good night, everybody.